I wiped my hands on my work apron and glanced at the clock. It was just past 6 in the evening, and I felt the familiar pull of loneliness settle deep in my chest. 5 years had passed since my divorce. 5 years of coming home to a quiet house, eating dinner alone, and burying myself in work just to avoid the hollow ache in my heart. At 38, I had resigned myself to this solitude. Friends had their own lives, and my social circle had dwindled to little more than colleagues and polite conversations with the barista at my favorite coffee shop. There was one person, though, who had once been a constant in my life, my nephew Daniel. He had been my shadow when he was younger, always seeking me out for advice, company, or just an excuse to avoid his parents for a little while. But as the years passed, he found his own way. University, work, friends, and the kind of bustling life that a young man of 23 should have. Our conversations, once effortless and frequent, had become rare, reduced to the occasional text or family gathering. I missed him, so when the bathroom pipes at my workplace needed urgent fixing, I saw an opportunity. Daniel had always been handy, helping his father with repairs since he was a teenager. I sent him a message, half expecting him to be too busy to respond. But to my surprise, he agreed. I wasn't sure why my heart gave a small, nervous flutter at the thought of seeing him again. It was ridiculous. He was my nephew. And yet, something about our distance over the past few years made me feel strangely uncertain, like I wasn't sure where we stood anymore. That evening, as I wiped down the counters in the break room, I heard the front door creak open. "Aunt Rachel!" His voice was deeper than I remembered, smooth and confident in a way that caught me off guard. I turned around, and for a moment I couldn't speak. The boy I had once known was gone. In his place stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and carrying himself with a quiet ease that made me pause. His dark hair, once unruly, was neatly styled, and his sharp features had lost the last traces of boyishness. "Daniel," I breathed, composing myself. "Wow, you've changed." He chuckled, stepping closer. "It's been a while." I nodded, clearing my throat. "It has. Thank you for coming. The bathroom's this way." He followed me down the hall, and I couldn't help but steal glances at him. Had it really been so long since we last spent time together? How had I missed this transformation? As he set to work, I leaned against the doorframe, watching him with quiet fascination. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, and every so often, he would glance up at me with that same warm expression I remembered from when he was younger. "So," he said after a while, tightening a bolt, "you still working too much?" I scoffed. "Says the guy who barely texts his aunt anymore." He winced. "Fair point." There was a beat of silence, the only sound the faint dripping of the pipes. Then he spoke again, softer this time. "I missed you, you know." Something in my chest tightened. "I missed you too, Daniel." His eyes met mine, and for a brief, startling moment, I felt something shift between us. A quiet understanding, a recognition of time lost. I looked away, pretending to check my phone. "Dinner after this?" "My treat." His smile was slow, easy. "I'd like that." And just like that, the space between us began to close. As Daniel worked, I found myself watching him more closely than I intended. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing the toned muscles of his forearms, and I noticed a faint smudge of grease on his fingers. There was something effortless about the way he moved, the confidence in his hands as he adjusted the wrench, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, just as he turned his head slightly, something else caught my eye. A tattoo, dark ink peeking out just above the collar of his shirt, curling slightly along the curve of his neck. I tilted my head, intrigued. "Since when do you have a tattoo?" Daniel glanced up at me and grinned. "This one." He touched the spot lightly. "Got it about a year ago. You like it?" I stepped closer, unable to resist my curiosity. The design was intricate, sharp lines blending into something almost abstract. It suited him, mature, bold, yet understated. I reached out before I could stop myself, tracing my fingers just above the ink. "It's really nice." He tensed slightly under my touch, and I quickly pulled back, feeling warmth creep up my neck. What was I doing? Daniel cleared his throat, shifting his attention back to the pipes. "All right, I think that should do it. Let me just check the water flow." Trying to shake the strange energy that had just passed between us, I stepped away and forced myself to focus on something else: dinner. I moved into the small kitchen attached to my office and started pulling out ingredients. Cooking had always been my way of grounding myself, a small comfort I could control. Daniel wandered in a few minutes later, wiping his hands on a rag. "Smells good. What's on the menu?" "Something special," I teased. "Since you never visit me anymore, I figured I'd make up for lost time." He chuckled, leaning against the counter. "I visit when you invite me." I scoffed. "Excuse me, mister, I do invite you. You're just too busy with your oh-so-important life." Daniel smirked. "What can I say? The ladies keep me occupied." I threw a dish towel at him, laughing. "Oh, please. I don't believe that for a second." We fell into an easy rhythm, me cooking, him stealing little tastes when he thought I wasn't looking. The warmth of the kitchen, the scent of sizzling garlic and herbs, and the quiet hum of conversation made the space feel cozy. And then came the compliments. "You know, I forgot how good of a cook you are," Daniel said, watching me with a look I couldn't quite place. "I think I might have to start coming around more often." I glanced at him over my shoulder. "Flattery will get you more food, but I'm still mad at you for disappearing for so long." He smirked, stepping closer. "Guess I'll have to make it up to you then." Something about his tone sent a shiver down my spine, but before I could dwell on it, a sound made both of us freeze. Drip, drip, then a sudden rush of water. We turned at the same time. "Oh no," I muttered. Water was seeping from under the bathroom door. Daniel cursed under his breath and ran toward it, me right behind him. The moment he pushed the door open, a burst of water greeted us. The faucet, completely detached, was spraying everywhere. "Hold it!" Daniel yelled over the rushing water, diving toward the sink. Without thinking, I grabbed a towel and ran forward, but the floor was already slick. My foot slipped, and before I could catch myself, I tumbled forward, right on top of Daniel. We hit the floor with a splash, water soaking us both. For a split second, neither of us moved. Then laughter erupted between us. The situation was ridiculous. Me sprawled over him, his arms around my waist, water dripping from my hair onto his face. "Oh my God!" I gasped between laughs. "We are terrible at this." Daniel grinned up at me, his chest still shaking with laughter. "You're the one who fell on me. You were in the way." His hands tightened slightly on my waist, and suddenly, the laughter faded into something else. The sound of rushing water became distant, the world shrinking down to just us. I was acutely aware of the way his fingers pressed into my sides, the rise and fall of his chest beneath me. His eyes, usually playful and teasing, had darkened slightly, holding mine with something deeper, something more uncertain. And then, without thinking, without allowing myself to hesitate, I leaned down. Our lips met. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, as if we were both testing the boundaries of something we didn't quite understand yet. But then Daniel responded, his hands pulling me closer, and suddenly hesitation was gone. Heat surged through me, the chill of the water forgotten as our bodies pressed together. It was wrong, wasn't it? But in that moment it didn't feel wrong. It felt like something that had been waiting to happen for far too long. I pulled back just slightly, my breath mingling with his. "Daniel!" His gaze flickered over my face, his grip still firm on my waist. "Tell me to stop, and I will." I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I leaned in again, my lips brushing against as an answer. And just like that, everything changed. The kiss lingered between us, charged with an intensity neither of us had expected. Water dripped from my hair onto his cheek. His breath was warm against my lips, and the sheer absurdity of the situation. Soaked clothes, a flooded bathroom, and us tangled together on the floor, made it all the more intoxicating. Then reality hit. I pulled back slightly, blinking as I caught my breath. We should probably do something about the water before this place turns into a swimming pool. Daniel exhaled a small laugh, but there was something unreadable in his eyes, something lingering. He nodded. Yeah, good idea. We reluctantly untangled ourselves, standing in the now-drenched bathroom. Water covered the floor. Our clothes clung to our bodies, and the faucet lay useless in the sink. I grabbed a bunch of towels and tossed one to Daniel. Dry yourself off. I'll get the hairdryer. He caught the towel easily, rubbing it through his damp hair as I rushed out of the bathroom to grab the hairdryer from my desk. When I returned, Daniel was standing in front of the mirror, peeling off his wet shirt, his toned back catching the light. I stopped in my tracks for just a second too long before shaking myself out of it. I plugged in the hairdryer and turned it on, running my fingers through my hair as the warm air blasted against me. Daniel did the same, shaking his head slightly to get the worst of the water out. As we stood side by side, I realized just how close we had become, not just in proximity, but something deeper. The unspoken tension, the subtle shifts, the way he looked at me differently now. I'll get you some dry clothes, I said, needing to put space between us before I let my thoughts get carried away. I stepped into the back room where I kept a few spare things and opened the closet. There, tucked in the corner, were some of my ex-husband's old clothes. He had never come back for them after the divorce, and I had never bothered to throw them out. Maybe out of laziness, maybe because they were just another thing I hadn't wanted to deal with. I grabbed a dry t-shirt and a pair of sweatpants before heading back to Daniel. Here, I said, handing him the clothes. He took them, but instead of changing immediately, he studied them for a moment, then looked at me. They belonged to your ex-husband, didn't they? I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, he never took them when he left. Daniel's jaw tensed slightly. Do you still love him? I blinked, surprised by the question. What? No. Of course not. You kept his stuff. I let out a small, exasperated laugh. That doesn't mean anything. I just never got around to getting rid of it. Daniel was quiet for a moment, as if weighing my words. Then, as he pulled the dry shirt over his head, he asked, What about you? Do you have anyone in your life? It was a simple question, but the weight behind it made my stomach twist. I shrugged, giving him an honest answer. No, I haven't really wanted anyone in a long time. Daniel nodded slowly, then met my eyes with an intensity that sent heat coursing through me. I have. I tilted my head slightly. Oh, who is the lucky girl? A ghost of a smile flickered on his lips. You? I felt my breath catch in my throat. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I had heard him right. What? I whispered. His gaze didn't waver. I've never liked anyone as much as I like you. My heart pounded against my ribs. The air between us felt thick, charged, like we were teetering on the edge of something dangerous but thrilling. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came. Daniel stepped closer, his fingers brushing against my wrist. Say something, he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. A slow, knowing smile played on his lips. Then don't say anything. He reached for me, pulling me into a tight embrace. His arms wrapped around my waist, warm and solid, and for the first time in years, I felt small in someone's hold. Safe. Wanted. Then his lips were on mine again, fiercer this time, more certain. I melted into him without thinking, my hands gripping the fabric of his borrowed shirt, my body pressing instinctively closer. The heat between us built, undeniable, intoxicating. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless. He cupped my face in his hands, his thumb brushing over my cheek. "I'll come by more often," he said, his voice low, husky. "If you don't mind." I let out a soft laugh, my fingers still gripping the front of his shirt. "I think I'd like that." And somehow I knew nothing would ever be the same again.